Namaste, Adab, Sat Sri Akal. Welcome to the wacky world of XIM, where no two days are the same. From the never ending batch meets and last minute submissions to the casual gossip sessions at X Cafe, there's always something new and exciting happening on campus. So come join us as we embrace the chaos and all the quirks that make XIM such a unique and special place. Who knows what adventures are waiting for us around the corner? Let's go find out. I, Shubham, take the pleasure of introducing you to the hosts of today's podcast, Hunar and Swarna. Over to you guys.
Hello, XIM. I am Guna Jagwani.
And I'm Swarna Bhattar, and we welcome you to the podcast.
It is often said that the best memories we make at XIM are over the all nighters we pull and the multiple cups of coffee we consume. Zimmix, a one of a kind podcast, brings to you Expressions Rewind, a special Expressions spin off episode. Today, on the podcast, we have someone who took this lead and will be expressing his journey of visualizing the first edition of Expressions 25 years ago. The mastermind behind Expressions 1997, Mr. Nihar Das was the GenSec when the first edition of Expressions was launched. I know you must be winding off a very tiring day in New York. We, on the other hand, are just waking up and preparing for a finance quiz by our very own Ramana sir.
And so we are pretty sure that you have studied from Ramna sir. So we just wanted to know more about your student life and how did you handle that never-ending quizzes.
I think our life used to be slightly easier than yours, as we just discovered in our 25th reunion on campus. And Professor Ramana was, I think, was slightly more lenient with us. And we, in absence of the technology that you guys have today, tried pushing the boundaries in every possible dimensions.
So the first thing I would like to ask you is what motivated you to become the Gen Sec of your batch? And once you decided, was there any moment you felt like you were missing out on certain parties or outings with your friends because of the number of responsibilities that you had to take on?
I still don't remember clearly as to how I became the Gen Sec, but if my vague memories point right, it was a few of my friends who with me to contest for it. During our time, we managed to achieve many things. We were at a stage for the student council and the student community did not even have a bank account. So even finding and founding the first bank account for the student council seemed like a great achievement, because even there are institutional barriers as to why you can or cannot have a bank account for the student council, right? So that, I think, that was one of our first achievements as the student council.
So it's great to know that it was a collaborative effort from your whole batch. But I need to ask this, someone who is coming from an engineering college. I have been itching to ask you this question. So it is generally said, and it's a stereotype that if you have never dated before, you will definitely find someone in a B school. And these are the expectations that were set for me as an engineer. But seeing the 70-30 ratio here, I don't think I'd be able to find someone that easily. So during your time, the ratio must have been even more unfair. So please tell us about the dating culture back then and how was everything on campus?
I think if you guys were there when we came for our 25th, and one of our batchmates, Sambit, was asked this question back to Ramana, Professor Ramana, and his question was this: right? We used to be a batch of 120 students. The batch before us had about 40, a ratio of 40 girls. Batch after had 35 odd. But our batch, I think, if I'm not mistaken, had to 12 to 13. So the issue of gender equality, we are the biggest victims. Okay. So therefore, we had to balance out, just because our own domain had such imbalance. We had to balance out with our either our junior batch or our senior batch. So that used to be the demographic.
So, sir, was it a general norm to date your senior, like girl senior to you?
I think because our own mix was so skewed against us, we didn't see any barriers.
Coming back slightly to the topic of expressions, how did you go about promoting expressions when you had not even access to a cell phone, or for that matter, like you mentioned, you did not even have a bank account for SEC at that point? I think it's we just had just like you guys, you had loads of passion. Just that the instruments and manifestation of the passion was different. So even to make calls, either we had to take father's permission. We used to use the placement office, or we had a small STD booth inside, just in front of our
mess. So we used to make calls, write letters, and that's how we used to reach out. And we just used to make just cold calls, visit offices, find contacts, and we were few of because relatively we were about 120 each batch, about 240 people, both batches together. So discovering contacts through somebody and through somebody are just most manual means of figuring out how we will go about it. And there was no precedence, there's no heritage. Expression was something that was not known. So all the odds were against us. But then with the passion, with whatever we had in our disposal, we just went with it. I remember, the we used to even walk into each darji ka dukan, right? Tailor suits. You used to ask them for sponsorship. I don't know whether there still exists a tailor called Prestige Tailor. It was right in front of Ram Mandir, and one of us actually persuaded him to, as in, give us 10 or 15,000 rupees then, because and the selling story was that, look, at during placements, 120 people will come and get their suit stitched from you. So that was the promise. And I think if you remain in that of mind, that becomes your captive audience. So it's as desperate. It was as desperate as that.
But so that is actually quite inspiring because now that we have the 25 years of legacy that you started, so we have a lot of contacts to go through with, or for that matter, just having an access to a smartphone. We make all of our calls online or like we schedule it much in advance. So thank you so much for starting this.
Expressions is just around the corner, so we were discussing a lot of interesting stories about how it started, and we just wanted to know more about the idea behind expressions. So, can you share a little bit about that?
See, I think the cultural fest in a B school, that concept is not new, right? It's not that we invented that concept, but we landed in a school we didn't have one, and we didn't have many things. Just like I mentioned, one of the things that we didn't have even a bank account. I think the idea that I think the collective zeal of the batch to just was not to leave it as a just a wishful thinking and just to materialize um, that collective wish into something of a reality. So that was actually the start point. It wasn't a person. It wasn't somebody just one's dream or an idea. It's something that we didn't have. The concept is quite common, just that we didn't have.
And how difficult or easy was it for you to get all the stakeholders on board, like college authorities for that matter, to like say yes to this festival? Like you're saying, while it was prevalent in other colleges, it wasn't there in our campus.
It was, I think, each step, just because it didn't have a precedence, was challenging. Getting the fathers to agree that we'll have a festival of this nature. Then people who had never had a festival but had heard about a festival and had visions of what happens in a festival, how wild it can become in a Jesuits campus, that scared a lot of people. How we'll get it done? Right. So for example, we didn't have a stage, and Bhubaneswar at that point in time did not have infrastructure to put up a stage. So I should when we visited college, I had given some old photographs of that time. So what did the first expression stage look like? And it was an engineering marvel, right? So we caught hold of some tent house guys, right, to put up a stage, which is elevated at least 10 or 12 feet, and then it's a massive platform, and then it was quite an engineering enterprise for our folks to actually give him the confidence to design the stage. So things like that, and so it's and a host of things. Just because nothing existed, everything was a bit of a
And to go from that to the version of expressions that we have today, having the legacy of being East India's largest cultural and management festival. So, did you ever think when you were starting it or going through all of that rigor that in your lifetime you would see it achieve that status? Not really, and that's why it just makes us. And when we think about it, when we spoke about it in the campus, it just makes us feel so amazingly delighted. And in fact, that sort of reminded me of
a line that Professor Govindarajan had written. He was one of our one of the professors in marketing. He was our one of our teachers who we remember very very fondly, and we all of our us in touch with him. He had written in a yearbook that the subsequent batches may take it to much greater heights, much bigger glory, but this is the batch which started it. Yes. So I think I still remember that line. It's sort of stuck in my mind, and that's exactly how it has happened. It's also almost like a bit of a forecast at that point in time. It is the biggest festival, and it just makes us feel so happy and fulfilled about what it is today. But it had a really, really exciting yet a very humble beginning.
Means, did you find to party right after you got over with the fest? Like as a batch, individually, just what were the things you were up to?
I think the rock fest was the energetic closure, right? You dance yourself with all the pent up energy to bring yourself to the closure, and then a lot of people went out, to eat something, drink something. So this went out of campus. Some of us in groups, and I remember I was sitting by the water cooler because it was pretty much 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and those are a couple of memories that sort of came to my mind. But yeah, that was sort of a rightful closer to the fest.
All right, so I have to ask you this question. At that time, I'm sure that GR1 was the only hostel and it was the hub for everything. It still is. It carries on that legacy that our senior batches have passed on to us. But how was the expressions scenes at GR1? Like, how was the community and how did you guys come together and plan for expressions? I'm sure that there would be some hostel stories that you would like to share with us. So particularly in respect of GR1, what were the hostel stories?
So we used to have just one boys hostel, one girls hostel. So
Yes.
and I think some of the things that we have not specifically related to the expressions, but during our time used to be. I think there was some incident that happened where they put a restriction on the timings in the girls hostel.
Oh,
Okay. So then there's been a massive sort of unrest that took place, and Suchi used to be the girl sec. So she took it up very strongly, and so that those things were reversed. So I think those are things that odd memories that I have. But I think the entire production of expressions collateral of our batch and the batch after, including our yearbooks, were all funded by that. So random stuff like that, right? So we were just dependent on each other a lot, and I think that close collaboration, dependence on each other, and just pushing each other to find or kya ho sakta hai, who else can do it, what can be done. And I think just got us to this point.
all right, sir. So two follow-up questions here. The first question is, what before the restriction was made on the girls, on the timing that the girls could enter the boys' hostel for, was it allowed for the whole day and the whole night? Was there no restriction before that?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure. I may be mistaken, but I think there wasn't any restriction on both the hostels. There was something. I mean, something happened because of which there was some restriction. But then again, so people took it up, and then I think it was reversed.
Right. So, sir, this restriction is still there. Yes. And a follow-up question to this. You mentioned that there was some unrest that happened when the restriction was made. So, could you please elaborate on the unrest that was there?
I mean, just displeasure and just going and talking to the father and then the dean, and then they said no, and then obviously gently but pursuing it again and again, and we just got had them loosen the restriction.
But did that work in your favor eventually?
It see, look, our entire stay was about that's the age where you test yourself against constraints, right?
Right.
We had these constraints,
Mhm.
and that happened to be these restrictions. But
Mhm.
that age is of that you are always testing yourself with some constraints. Just that these happen to be ours.
All right. Got it. All right. Got it. Sir, what was the post expressions party scene at XIMB at that point of time?
I think the party scene used to be pretty always on, right? So it's not just expression. Yeah, it was a crescendo. It was a big thing that we managed to do, and obviously there was a lot of joy that we managed to put it out. But parties used to happen before, after, even within. So not because we had fest on our campus. So there was a lot of celebration within, and what people managed to accomplish. But parties used to be a lot more frequent in our time and days.
Sir, you were talking about some of the restrictions. So while we are also having the time of our life here in the last 2 terms that we have already been on campus, we too have certain restrictions that we would have wanted lifted. So could you elaborate more? So one, you talked about like how there was a deadline set, and in fact, your batch has now the legacy to say that they were the ones who even got introduced the new restriction to this campus. So is there any other such thing that you guys introduced, or like were there certain restrictions that you as a junior batch were facing at that time?
I think they were. We worked a lot with the institute and with father to sort some of these things out. So we had a very strict hostel warden, for example, for a year. So, and we had to work around him, work with him, sometimes work against him. But the thing was, the whole stay of 2 years was to just work with these restrictions to go around. Some you remove, some you have to live with. But that's pretty much life, and I mean that also reflects in real life as well.
Another question I had, sir, like we in our batch have a lot of late night and morning gossip sessions with our seniors, and like we can discuss anything about projects, about assignments, and whatever. So, how was your equation with your senior batch?
I think we had really good relationship with both batches. Obviously, there was dependence on the senior batch. You take the guidance because it's unlike engineering colleges where you live on the campus for 4 years, and there is a lot of time in 2 years. I mean, and the overlapping with your senior or junior batch is just about a year, less than a year, right? So therefore, a lot of the time you are trying to take as much of guidance and ready-made help as possible.
So when your batch had come for the grand homecoming event, we had heard that there were a lot of couples in the 97 batch who are happily married now. So could you tell us some interesting stories around them, around their time at XIMB and their life now?
See, I think the couples in our batch are all married to junior batches because there's so few people, there's so few girls in our batch. There's very little chance. So I
Right.
think we just have one couple in our batch. I think we have one couple. There are more marriages between batches rather than within.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but if your batchmates were dating the junior girls, then what were the junior guys doing? Like, where were they going?
It's look, when you define your territories, man.
Yes.
If there is a drought in your territory, you look in the neighboring territory, right?
Right, sir.
But
Yes,
I think
sir.
at the same time, I remember we when you receive the admission letter, right? It's a pretty
Right.
formal, standard letter from the college. What we had done in our batch was that we sent a very funky letter from the, not the alumni but students council, to each, and a lot of people, a lot of our junior batches still have that letter from our batch. So that was a very funny and funky but warm introduction onto campus.
But sir, after hearing your stories, I'm also waiting for my junior batch to come. So hopefully that is going to be soon. But
All the best,
yes,
right?
thank you so much. Sir. Thank you, thank you so much. Just one more thing. I'm sure that when you were planning expressions with all the restrictions in place, there would have been a lot of rules that you guys would have had to go around and find your way through it. So, are there any other any rules that you remember in particular that had gone around particularly?
Our bigger challenges was putting on a stage, right? So there was no infrastructure in Bhubaneswar to put up a stage, right?
Right.
Unlike today, where you have the knockdown kits available to put up a stage within a very short period of time. At that time, there used to be only bamboos and the wooden slabs.
Right. Yes, sir.
And to put up a stage, the biggest tent house was very. I mean, he said, "नहीं हो सकता है." So some of our guys had to put the engineering funding to assure him, design with him to put that. Then we talk about the rock concert, right? The power consumption, how that happened. What's the total power load? Those are things that I remember are bigger challenges we had to solve rather than the restrictions. Big restrictions are easier to come by. I mean, and there was no conflict. I mean, we rarely remember having a conflict with the institute. Always talking to them, obviously gently pushing and persuading them. Rarely there was a conflict. From opening the first bank account to setting up a stage that never happened to sorting out the power situation. Those are things I remember were more significant and material challenges.
And so, were there any specific events that you had in mind, like you said about the rock concert? So, was there some like inspiration behind the fest that these are the things that we will definitely do, or like definitely not do to make it unique?
See, for us, I think the whole fest, whether it'll happen or not happen, many times we're on the verge of saying nahi ho sakta hai. So when we started going for sponsorship, we had no idea how much we'll get. So when we tried, and then a couple of days, month passed by, we had a lot of disappointment. So we had to this again call in a general body meeting and to decide that look, what is the minimum critical threshold and what is the date by which if we didn't get that, we'll say no, ये नहीं हो सकता है. So I remember that we had set a minimum budget of 2.25 lakhs. Right? Okay. We had to minimum get a 2.5 lakhs to 2.25 lakhs. But we ended up actually getting about six and a half at the end of it. But we had no idea whether we'll get, because the first stint of trying to get was miserable. There are a lot of rejections. Sponsorship didn't come through. But as we started rolling in, and so we had to put that to 2.25. I still remember 25 years later, I still remember the magic figure by a certain date was 2.25 lakhs. 2.5. So we got a commitment of that. Then we declare the fest going, and we'll go ahead with it. If not, we'll cancel the fest.
Okay. And so, like how we have celebrities right now coming in, was there any such thing that happened during your time as well? Was there any local band or something that participated, like outside of the college?
So I think the opening guest was Rusi Modi, and we had a special place for exam. And because I also had worked in Tata Steel, obviously he was at that time he was a celebrity CEO, so he was our opening guest.
Yes.
We had a rock group from Calcutta who came and performed.
Okay.
That time, and that used to be a very favorite band, especially in the Eastern circuits of whether it's NBSM in IMCAL or Springfest in IIT KGP and in those places. So that's the band that played. Yeah.
So you talked about that magic number of 2.25 lakhs. So once you exceeded it, was there some sense of luxury that came in that now we'll incorporate certain things, we'll raise the stakes to a certain level? What was that extra budget spent on?
On a lot of things, like for example, the prize money, right? We had one of the big draws of those times used to be the prize money, and still remains a big draw amongst the students community. So to increase participation, first, I mean, we invested very heavily in prize money, and that was one of the biggest thing that we could invest. And then by the end of it, because we had planned for 2.25, we could spend only 4 lakhs, and after that, then retrospectively started paying people except I think the exec committee or the steering committee. We paid everybody the commissions. Even after that, we had, I think, about 2 lakhs or 2.5 lakhs left, which we passed on to the next batch, so that they start up with a healthy kitty, so that you start off at a good place. Okay, so as we come to the end of this podcast, is there anything else you would like to share with us? So any inputs, anything about XIM? No inputs, just a moment of celebration that we happen to be on campus for our 25th reunion when we met you guys, and you are hosting the 25th year of Xpressions. Yes. It's an amazing coincidence, and some of us were also bit part part of your sponsorship collection, given the difficulty that you had. It just felt like a bit of deja vu, right? So the same challenges that you're facing just because you are a new batch on campus, haven't spent much time on campus, so you don't have much of a background or the passover of knowledge or money, and the fest had stopped for 2 years. Somewhat the challenges were similar, so there was a lot of deja vu in my mind, and a lot of us were just happy to some way be part of the 25th year of Expressions.
Thank you so much, sir, for spending your valuable time with us today. It was a very interesting chat. Hopefully, we can catch you on campus sometime soon again.
It's wonderful talking to you, and I'm very sure that, as Professor Govindarajan had said, the Expressions on in 25th year would create its own benchmark and its own milestone. I have no doubts about that. What we had created was it was a pioneering act, but it wasn't a milestone of its own apart from being the pioneering apart from being the start. So after 25 years, I think it's the fact that you've taken to make it the largest and the biggest festival of the zone is an amazing, and the fact that it becomes the centerpiece of the cultural calendar of the city is an amazing achievement.